Welcome to the Beardyheads Book Club, a place where a pretentious hipster and a serial curmudgeon agree to disagree about just about everything. And now, without further ado, here they are. Hey, I'm Jake, and I use a typewriter because it's a superior writing device.
And I'm Steven. I use a pencil because I'm a person.
And I'm Dave, and I don't use anything, and I'm just here.
Nice.
Welcome to Beardyheads Book Club.
Yeah, that was good.
Episode 4, fourth episode in the Beardyheads Book Club series. Today we're going to be talking about Man in the High Castle by Philip K. Dick. Kinda.
Yeah, episode 4.1.
4.1. We actually had recorded this and went back, and unfortunately all the audio was borked. So we're doing it again.
Awesome. I love this idea.
You were a big fan of this book, I'm pretty sure. Real quick. If you were going to describe this book in 30 seconds, go ahead and lay it on me.
You want me to go first?
You go ahead and go first.
Okay. Well, it's called The Man in the High Castle. That's pretty much mostly what I remember of it because it was dull as hell. I can tell you that America lost World War II, and the Nazis have, what is that, East Coast? Yeah, East Coast. And the Japs have the West, and they coexist for some fucking reason. And then there's the Mountain States, which sounds like that's where all the fun shit is. And there's some people, and they do some stuff, and it's boring as hell, and I don't recommend this goddamn book.
All right, Dave?
Well, yeah, it's a book with a bunch of different stories that really don't go anywhere. I mean, I really don't know what he was trying to make this book be about. There's no one central story, and the stories that it does tell are not really connected. And it just bored the hell out of me. Like the entire thing with Frank and his
Well, we'll get there. We'll get there.
Okay.
General thoughts. Thoughts.
Yeah, it was boring as hell, and the characters did nothing. I mean, there were some good points, but yeah, overall.
This is a alternate history novel. It's a spy story, and in the last closing, probably quarter of it, one of the characters becomes self-aware that they exist within a novel. It's a novel that becomes sentient. That's my so let's go ahead and get into the book. The easiest way to break this book down, in my opinion, is to go by each plot. So you have the first plot, which is I call the Operation Dandelion plot, which is Baines is a Swedish business guy who is actually a Nazi disguised as a Swedish businessman, and he's trying to warn the Japanese High Council that there is an impending Nazi nuclear attack. Second plot, we'll call it the artist plot, is all about Frank Frink quitting his job and starting his own business. And the third plot, the assassination plot, is all about Frank Frink's wife in the Rocky Mountain States. And she hooks up with a truck driver, and they bang, and then he's going to try and kill somebody. He's going to try to kill the titular Man in the High Castle.
Who does not live in a high castle.
Does not live in a high castle.
More like a house.
More like, typical suburban 50s.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. White picket fence, maybe.
Nice.
I would actually say that the high castle. Well, I don't know. The high castle to me seemed to be. I don't know that the high castle ever existed.
Well, he probably just wanted people to think it existed, so they wouldn't come after him.
Yeah, it's never really made clear whether or not the high castle existed or not. So a couple of themes of the novel that I liked was fiction versus reality. What's real, what's not real. It's always a theme in Philip K. Dick's work. It was written in 1962, published in 1963, which was, I believe, right around the time Martin Luther King made his march on Washington. So there's a lot about racial division and racial cleansing and stuff like that. I felt like there were a lot of themes about sympathy and appropriation by an occupying culture, which was, sort of flipped around to sort of take a look at our world. They go into what is historicity, a little bit, and there's a little bit about I feel like the failures of the Allies and our reality post-war, and just some stuff about free will in there as well. From what we were talking about in the first time we recorded this, you guys didn't pick up on any of this.
Not really. No.
No. I mean, maybe the I Ching and free will, but that's about it.
I still, what the fuck is historicity? That's made up.
It is a made up term. I mean,
well, it is made up, but it's sort of a made up term that sort of becomes a thing later.
I mean, I understand it. Like, basically, it's trying to say, oh, this item has no value, but you think it does because I told you it went through this. Like,
yeah, and really that becomes a thing later, like toward the end of the book, where Tagomi shoots a guy. He shoots two people with a gun that is allegedly, arguably a fake. It's a fake historical artifact that he bought from Robert Childan. It was supposed to be sort of, it's supposed to be an actual Colt 44 revolver, I think. Ball and cap, black powder revolver. He shoots two people with it, and then it becomes historical, I would argue, because he just shot two people in a big uprising, in like a Nazi uprising.
I wouldn't call it an uprising as much as an attack and an attempt to kill people.
Yeah, an assassination. How about that?
They're not overthrowing anybody.
But that's a historical moment. I mean, in the context of the universe, and I feel like that's where the historicity comes from. Is Tagomi's use of it, like this item that was not historical.
I mean, yeah, it has historicity now, but really it still goes back to that it only has value if you believe it has value.
So yeah, then I Ching and free will. Like, that was another thing I really liked in this one.
Okay, yeah, the I Ching pissed me off because it felt so like a fucking lazy-ass plot device.
Well, I mean, if you look at how he wrote the novel, so if you read about how he wrote the novel, he actually used the I Ching to make plot decisions and stuff. But, like, one of the points of the novel is, like, what is free will? Does free will exist? Do we live in, like, a simulacrum of a reality, or do we live in reality itself, you know?
I have no idea where you got that one from. I saw nothing about free will so much in that book.
The entire ending of the book is them questioning free will.
I just remember her getting in a taxi. That's all.
Pretty much. I mean, I guess you could say that the ending was about it, but I wouldn't say that the novel was really so much about free will, because it just jumped everywhere to me. So
okay, but what happens whenever somebody needs to make a decision in this book?
Use the fucking I Ching.
Right. And what do they do? Do they ignore the I Ching? The I Ching?
Sometimes.
Who ignores the I Ching in the book? I can't remember.
The Nazis, probably.
Well, the Nazis never use it. That's the whole thing.
Because they're smart.
They don't believe in God.
Yeah.
Doesn't Frank ignore it at least once?
I think he gets a reading off of it that he interprets in a weird way, and that's about it. But the interpretation of that is more of it's more about the overarching plot, and it doesn't have anything to do with him specifically. Because I think he does it, and it's like, yes, fortune is happening, but like later on the ship will sink, and that's sort of implied that means Operation Dandelion will be carried out, or that there will be a third world war between Japan and the Nazis.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
You can just tell Steve's enthusiastic over
it's just this book. It was just so goddamn boring, and all this shit you picked up on. I'm like, I guess, but I just, I don't see any of that. It just tried to be like a spy thriller, and it just was boring. I didn't see any of that fucking philosophical shit, which I have seen in his short stories, but in this one, I'm just like, what the fuck is happening? Of course, this is not a book you should read when you're going to bed at night, because it will bore you to tears. I mean, it's dull. Well, for somebody like me, it's very dull. Jake obviously loved it. I think he's an insane person for it, but whatever. Teach their own. Yeah. Crazy person.
Okay, Dave, when we started first reading this novel, you had talked about the alternate history that you considered it completely implausible.
It's not very plausible. I can't think of any position that would have, or any outcome or any events that would have ended with the occupation, the complete occupation pretty much of the northern hemisphere or the American continents by Japan and Germany. I mean, they just did not have the resources to do that. I mean, taking over Russia alone in China, they couldn't have done all these things.
But what happened to Russia?
It's implied that there was a giant cleansing. Ethnic cleansing.
I mean, that's awful. Yeah, don't laugh at that.
Well, that happened in reality.
Yeah.
I mean, Russia's done some pretty unique things. But it also I don't think that their cultural ideologies, especially the Nazis, would have allowed them to coexist peacefully for 20 years.
Yeah, I think the Nazis would have rubbed them out.
I mean, they would have gone to war the second they could have.
Yeah.
I am gonna say that Philip K. Dick actually addresses that concept really, really fast. Anytime somebody talks about the grasshopper lies heavy, everybody goes, but the Allies couldn't have won the war. Like, the Allies couldn't have done this. The Allies couldn't have done that. It's all talking about, like, why the Allies couldn't have won the war. And even at the end of the book, there's a moment where she's like, this story's not even about us. Or this story's not even about the Allies winning the war. This story's about us. So it's kind of like, I kind of feel like he knew that he was sort of putting forward something sort of implausible.
Yeah.
But he really just didn't care what you thought about it.
Well, it was more of, in this reality, this is horse shit. Like, it's horse shit that the Allies would have won in that reality because they sucked and they made bad decisions.
Part of it's just my problem since I'm a history nerd, and it's hard for me to sit there and be like, oh, yeah. Like, it's something that I'm going to notice and be annoyed by.
I could see that bothering me if I was a nerd.
Well, you are a nerd, just a different kind of nerd.
Yeah, I'm just not a history nerd.
No, it's definitely not a book where you're going to find a lot of historical parallels. It's not a book where you're going to find a lot of realism because, I mean, it all hinges on the fact that, number one, FDR wasn't assassinated. And they had no way of knowing what would happen if FDR was assassinated, or had lived. So they're kind of like drawing from conjecture. And that's where a lot of like the free will part comes in, because that's exactly how Benson, the guy who is the man in the high castle, that's exactly how he derives the book, is with the I Ching.
Oh, I Ching. Do you think Philip K. Dick used the I Ching when he wrote it?
He did. I said that literally 5 minutes ago.
No, I wasn't listening.
Of course you weren't.
You can just tell we were so enthusiastic. I mean,
even talking about this book is dull.
We try. We're trying our best here.
I just can't wait to read a book for this podcast that I'm excited about and that Jake hates.
I mean, to be honest, that was kind of Infinite Jest, is you were excited about it, and then we ended up both just giving up. And it's not so much we hated it.
No, it was a good book.
It was just
weird as shit, and I liked it because it was weird.
Yeah, that's another problem.
The weird got turned up to 11 at some point. And I think this is a book where the weird wears normal clothes.
Yeah, well, I mean, there was never a dull moment in Infinite Jest, for me at least. In this one, it was just like, oh, god damn it, why are they talking in fucking broken English again? What the fuck are they saying again? What the fuck is Project Dandelion? I don't care.
I almost feel like this is a book that sort of suffered, and it, as far as widespread appeal, because it at its root, when you read Philip K. Dick novels, I feel like you go into them seeing like Blade Runner or Minority Report or any of the other stuff that's been made from Philip K. Dick material. You go into them, and that's a totally different thing. But like for some reason, this one like it wore clothes that made it more like a normal novel. So like you go into it thinking you're reading an alternate history spy thriller, and it ends up being a treatise on like free will and historicity and all this other stuff, and like what is an alternate universe and why, what is an alternate history, and do these histories actually exist and stuff like that. And it, like I said in the beginning, like it's almost like the book itself becomes sentient and self-aware of what it is toward the end.
I compare it more to like the Matrix, the second Matrix movie. I went into that movie, went in some badass car chases and some badass other shit, and they pull the old switcheroo on me and give me a 20-minute fucking philosophy lesson at the end.
Yeah, when this book was pitched to me, it sounded very fascinating and interesting, and then it just, I mean, it never seemed to decide, at least in my opinion, what it wanted to be.
Mm-hmm.
I think it knew exactly what it wanted to be, and it achieved it. I think the problem is the book was not written for the everyday reader. The book was written to impress a bunch of people who were, people who were English professors and stuff like that. Like, this is literature. This goes beyond being just a novel. Like, this goes into literature.
Oh yeah, it's got a Hugo Award. I mean, yeah, it is literature. Literature.
As we get all pretentious.
Yes.
But yeah, I feel like it's sci-fi, and sci-fi is normally like pretty it's pretty straightforward. It's facts and like concepts, and they use those facts and concepts to like illustrate another concept of some kind. Like Star Trek did it really well by using like alien races as stand-ins for black people and stuff like that. And what else was there? Star Wars, to a lesser extent, is kind of like about World War II in a way. Sci-fi sort of uses other things as stand-ins, whereas this is using a stand-in to actually talk about writing. Like, this is a different kind of sci-fi or alternate history, in that he's using his platform not to talk about things as they are, but to talk about things as we write about them. So I feel like if you're going into it and you're not the kind of person who's used to reading into context and reading into imagery and stuff like that, and going like, okay, what are these, this litany of seemingly unrelated events, like what did they have in common, things like that. I don't feel like it's a novel that's very rewarding to read. I could see why you guys didn't enjoy it. I can see why most people didn't enjoy it.
I mean, the way you're describing it, I mean, it sounds like if you aren't like really into writing, forget any other thing. Forget about if you want to read into like, read into the story or read into things. If you're, the way you just described it, sounds like if you're not like a writing major or somebody that just loves the way things are written, that there's no point in reading this book.
I wouldn't even say writing major. I think the second thing you said just there is, if you are not into examining why things are written and looking more in depth into the nuts and bolts of the writing, then it's probably not a very rewarding book for you.
So basically,
so philosophy.
I wouldn't even say philosophy. Like, I know a lot of people who read books and they like to pick them apart and they like to think of the imagery. I mean, that's what Infinite Jest was written for.
Basically, you're saying that this was a writing workshop.
Exercise.
Well, no, because you can't give input on it, so that automatically, never mind.
Well, but this is like, this is rewarding if you're into writing, but then most people.
But I'm not talking about if you're into being a writer yourself. I'm trying to make that distinction here. You're into the writing.
Yeah, I understand
You're
that.
into reading writing, not so much reading stories. And that's the kind of person I am, and that's the kind of person I was before I even started school, and started taking writing classes and stuff. I was somebody who read books for their writing rather than for the story, which is a reason I don't really like Game of Thrones, or Song of Ice and Fire series. Like, my second playthrough of that, read through that.
Getting into our other side, Joe.
hard to shift gears after the old Beardyheads game cast, but yeah, after my second read through of that, I realized, well, the writing isn't that good, and everybody's sort of picking it apart and trying to like find hints and stuff in the writing, and I'm like, but this writing is pretty meat and potatoes. Like George R. R. Martin is not like a super talented writer, whereas Philip K. Dick is, he's the father of modern sci-fi. He's the father of modern, like, he's like of cyberpunk. Like, really, he's like the great grandfather of cyberpunk, where all these sort of like concepts about free will and stuff are explored in greater depth. Or the impact of technology or the impact of history on society and stuff like that is really explored in cyberpunk. Whereas, and then you have steampunk, which is like where the impact of airships is explored on something for some reason.
Throw gears on it.
Put some gears on it. Exactly.
Put some gears. Use some steam.
I'm just glad that Philip K. Dick did not once describe what horse semen smells like, because that's a good thing.
And everything in those books, by the way, everything in George R. R. Martin books, I noticed this in my second read through. We might have to do this. Is just like talk about the Game of Thrones books at some point. Just do a chrono read through or whatever, or a series read through, and just like how everything smells like semen.
Well, some guys are just really in the semen, I guess.
I mean,
he is.
I'm not sure.
And why is there horse jizz everywhere?
Why is there horse jizz fucking everywhere?
Do they just jerk off their horses when they're bored or something?
These horses are just going all over the place. Just the randiest goddamn horses I've ever encountered.
So I'm gonna give you guys like the two crazy takeaways I got from this novel.
Okay.
And the first one I've already said, which is this is a novel where one of the characters. This is a novel that sort of started as one thing, but like think of it as a novel that it's sort of evolved every time somebody read it. So at this point, like something else is happening. Something else, very small things have changed. It's basically at this point where people in the novel understand that they are in a novel. Is the first big thing. The novel becomes self-aware at the end. The novel understands that everybody understands that they're being guided by the I Ching. At least all the three people in the scene understand that their fate is guided by the I Ching, which was actually the decider for the novel. So, like, in a way, the novel's very self-aware. The other one's kind of a weird fan theory, and we're going to talk about Tagomi and him going to our reality. Which is a weird thing about historicity, but the link there is that he goes to our reality, much like in the TV show. He has jewelry that Frank Frink has made, and this is jewelry that in this timeline didn't exist. This was before like modern sort of conceptual jewelry, or like modern, like basically esoteric jewelry that didn't represent anything. It was just shapes, geometric shapes, and that attempted to convey some sort of emotion or some sort of knowledge. So Frank Frink makes that. Somehow, through a wild series of events, it ending up in the hands of Tagomi. Tagomi is meditating on it. He's like demanding that it tell him his secrets, and then it does, and it transports him to our reality. So, like, with all the talk about historicity and all the talk about the sort of the hidden history behind objects, like my crazy fan theory, is that Frank Frink at some point, unbeknownst to him, switched over from our reality to living in this book. So Frank Frink is actually from our reality. I feel like he's a real person that actually came over to our reality somehow, or came over from our reality somehow, and now exists within this book. That's my weird fan theory about this book. So I'm going to stop going on about this book, because I know you guys have heard everything I've had to say about it. We could argue about it all day long, like who's it written for, and blah, 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 blah. But it sounds like, let's just go straight to the recommendations. Or straight to, would you recommend this book?
I would recommend it if you are really into reading books the way Jake says to.
Yes.
If you're into reading, books that, aren't chock full of symbolism, and you don't have to shut your mind off. You don't have to, use some of that English learning you got it at your college, then yeah, I wouldn't read this.
Yeah, I wouldn't read this because I don't know. I wanted to point this out, but Jake kept going and going. But the thing is written in a way that it just seems so manic. Like I'm sitting there and things seem calm, and then it goes to an internal monologue, and it's all crazy.
Yeah.
I'm just like, wait.
In broken English.
Oh, be glad you weren't here for Infinite Jest.
Oh my god. I felt like I needed to be high to read that book.
It helped.
Might have helped reading this book.
Yeah.
That I couldn't tell you.
I mean, or under the influence of something.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would actually recommend this book if, like I said, you're the kind of, just like Steve said too, if you're the kind of person who likes teasing apart a story and like sort of looking at the inner symbolism and stuff. Like, I don't think that we can really provide a good frame of context. I feel like this is better discussed in like I don't know. I feel like this is better discussed with your literature professor or with your writing professor than it is just with like random people in a podcast.
Or your two drinking buddies that you were like, hey, let's read this book. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, more or less. Yeah. I really don't think it's a book you read for story. I think it's a book you read for writing.
Yeah.
Which to me just kind of defeats the purpose. I mean, you should be able to write a book that conveys a story and the writing stuff that you mentioned.
Well, I mean, I would argue that you're saying there's a right way and a wrong way to read a book, and I disagree with that statement entirely.
Well, okay, we'll have to agree to disagree here.
There's the right way and there's the Jake way.
The only 2 books I've written were done in 30 days. Where's your fucking novels?
On the bookshelf, I read them. Those are my novels that I purchased.
Mine are under my bed. That's the only place I have to stash them.
So the next book we're reading is going to be Red Mars by Ken Stanley Robinson. It's the first book of the Mars trilogy. Pretty excited about it.
I'm very excited. I've been wanting to read this book forever. I just never got around to it.
I have no idea what it's about, so I'm going into this blind.
That's good. You should.
Okay. No expectations. Good.
About a serial killer teddy bear at a shut down Chuck E. Cheese.
Oh my fucking god! No, that's not what it is about. The plot of this is actually supposed to be good.
Oh.
I don't know. You might be able to spin a plot like that could be interesting.
To be fair, when it's my turn, there is a Five Nights at Freddy's book.
Well, I told you, man. From now on, I think probably the way we're going to do it from now on is we're just going to put together a jar. When I get back to town, we'll throw all our book suggestions in a jar, and we're just going to let fate decide.
Oh my god.
We're going to use the Yarrow stocks and consult the I Ching.
Fuck you.
To find out.
I will
find
set
out we're not
you
real.
on fire. I will burn your apartment down.
So if this reality isn't real, do you think Jaden Smith is actually from an alternate reality?
Jaden Smith is he's our Frank Frake.
Yeah.
How can books be real if our words aren't real? I don't know. If the I Ching says we're not real.
Do you think in his reality he qualifies as a good actor?
I don't know. I think
you think he qualifies as an actor?
I was gonna say I don't think he's acted in anything since After Earth, or Scientology the movie, as it's known in real people circles.
Yeah.
Wasn't that a Shyamalan film?
Unfortunately.
Yeah, that was. Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
Poor Shyamalan just went to shit, didn't he?
Well, that's what happens when hype gets you.
Went to shit?
Hey man, Sixth Sense and
okay, he did 2 good movies.
I liked Signs. I don't care what people say.
Signs is alright.
It was
Signs,
he lost
Signs
me with
was,
The Village.
Signs was like looking behind the curtain and finding out that the fucking giant talking head was just a doddering old man pulling some levers. Like, Signs was just like, oh, I see all your tricks now.
Well, yeah, I mean, you can't do the same trick over and over again. I don't think they had a real the twist in Signs was
the
water.
twist was that water kills them.
Yeah, and let's go to fucking Earth of all planets.
And it just completely invalidated the entire rest of the plot.
I mean, there's only water in the air, but whatever.
Yeah. Anyways, now we're talking about Signs. So yes, Kim Stanley Robinson read Mars. We're going to read the first book of the Mars trilogy. And then we are going to pick another book at that point, which we're going to be recording this one on February the 7th, I believe was what we had.
Hopefully, if everything goes as planned.
Yep, the morning of February 7th. So we'll probably have that out to you by February 9th, with any luck. So yeah, you got until then to read Red Mars, or you just don't download that episode until you're done. But that's going to be our next book, and then we'll decide where to go from there.
And tune in for our M. Night Shyamalan podcast that's going to be coming out soon.
Yes, M. Night Shyamalan cast.
Where we just complain and complain.
Or let me think of unfilmable. I don't know. I'm trying to think of M. Night Shyamalan titles that I could make puns on.
Or I'm a writer? Like with a question mark?
Question mark?
Pretentious hipster.
I made movies?
Are You Afraid of the Dark? The adaptation.
Hey, Are You Afraid of the Dark was good though.
Yeah, it was good when it was the plot to The Sixth Sense.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that was true.
But anyways, in the meantime, sorry for the short podcast, but like I said, we're re-recording it. If you'd like a copy of the original audio, you can send us an email, beardyheads@gmail.com. I'll compress it into an MP3 file. You can hear me rant about the book and how much I loved it, and hear Steve and Dave tell me how stupid I am.
Yeah, pretty stupid.
Sometimes.
Yeah, he's pretty dumb.
Special guy.
But in the meantime, I'm Jake.
I'm Steven.
I'm David.
And we'll see you guys next time on Beardyheads Book Club. You've been listening to another great episode of Beardyheads Book Club. Our theme was provided by the amazingly talented Dwayne Andrews. Find more music like it at dwayneandrews.ca. Don't forget to find the Beardyheads on Twitter, Facebook, Twitch, YouTube, and Instagram. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you again real soon.